All right. So, chapter 82 in the book of Enoch. So now we're going over to the to the to the visions that Enoch was having. All right. So the days of his influence have been completed. The same additional leader of 1,000. Okay, and now I have shown thee, my son Methuselah, every sight which I saw prior to thy birth. I will relate another vision which I saw before I was married. They resemble each other. The first was when I was learning a book, and the other before I was married to thy mother. I saw a potent vision, and on account of these things besought the Lord. I was lying down in the house of my grandfather Malalel, and I saw in a vision heaven purifying and snatched away. And falling on earth, I saw likewise the earth absorbed by a great abyss, and mountains suspended over mountains. Hills were sinking upon hills, lofty trees were gliding off from their trunks, and were in the act of being projected and of sinking into the abyss. Being alarmed at these things, my voice faltered. I cried out and said, "The earth is destroyed." Then my grandfather Malalel raised me up and said to me, "Why dost thou cry out, my son? And wherefore dost thou thus lament?" I related to him the whole vision which I had seen. He said to me, "Confirmed is that which thou hast seen, my son, and potent the vision of thy dream respecting every secret sin of the earth. Its substance shall sink into the abyss, and a great destruction take place." Wow. So even Enoch's grandfather was very holy. So righteous in his generation. That's how Noah comes about. All of those people were holy men up until Noah's generation. And potent. Now, my son, rise up and beseech the Lord of glory, for thou art faithful, that a remnant may be left upon the earth, and that he would not wholly destroy it. My son, all this calamity upon earth comes down from heaven. Upon earth shall there be a great destruction. So this is the vision of the flood. Then I arose, prayed, and entreated, and wrote down my prayer for the generations of the world, explaining everything to my son Methuselah. When I went out below and looking out to heaven, beheld the sun proceeding from the east, the moon descending to the west, a few scattered stars, and everything which God has known from the beginning. I blessed the Lord of judgment and magnified him, because he had sent forth the sun from the chambers of the east, that ascending and rising in the face of heaven, it might spring up and pursue the path which has been pointed out to it. I lifted up my hands in righteousness and blessed the Holy and Great One. I spoke with the breath of my mouth and with the tongue of flesh, which God had formed for all the sons of mortal men, that with it they may speak, giving them breath, a mouth, and a tongue to converse with. Wow. Listen to this. I spoke with the breath of my mouth and with a tongue of flesh, which God has formed for all the sons of mortal men, that with it they may speak, giving them breath, a mouth, and a tongue to converse with. Blessed art thou, O Lord, the King, great and powerful in thy greatness, Lord of all the creatures of heaven, King of kings, God of the whole world, whose reign, whose kingdom, and whose majesty endure forever and ever. From generation to generation shall thy dominion exist. All the heavens are thy throne forever, and all the earth thy footstool forever and ever. For thou hast made them, and over all thou reignest. No act whatsoever exceeds thy power. With thee wisdom is unchangeable, nor from thy throne and from thy presence is it ever averted. Thou knowest all things, seest and hearest them, nor is anything concealed from thee, for thou perceives all things. I really do like it when people are praising, because sometimes when I pray, because pray is how you start to praise. Praise. So when you hear people praising, they're praying. So this is a high prayer by a righteous man. But he's praying not only for himself, but for the whole world, that the world might be saved. But he's already appraising God because he's worthy of doing this. The angels of thy heavens have transgressed, and on mortal flesh shall thy wrath remain. Woe! The angels of thy heavens have transgressed, and on mortal flesh, which are the people, humans, shall thy wrath remain. So we are getting the wrath of angels. So this is what it actually means when people are asking like, hey, what did we ever do to God? It's not like what we did, it's what the angels did to us. So that's why when everything was created, God said, it is very good. And then he moved away and left Adam and Eve in the garden. Now then, O God, Lord and mighty King, I entreat thee and beseech thee to grant my prayer, that a posterity may be left to me on earth, and that the whole human race may not perish, that the earth may not be left destitute, and destruction take place forever. O my Lord, let the race perish from off the earth which has offended thee, but a righteous and upright race establish for a posterity forever. Hide not thy face, O Lord, from the prayer of thy servant. Wow. So this is a book. Again, I'll reiterate that this is a book that was said by Jesus. Well, he didn't name the book, but he said that in the end, it will be like in the days of Noah. And the days of Noah are being spoken of by Enoch. So these are the days of Noah when we know this, what is happening in the days of Noah. Before, all of the other generations previously didn't have this type of information. And I actually don't know if there is a lot of information such as this one online, because the reason why I did make this whole exposition of this book is because I haven't found it anywhere. So I just thought like, so we should just do it together. So yeah. So what it's actually speaking about is the meek will inherit the earth. And what is insane about this is that this is a flood that is imminent, that is happening. It's going to happen in a few generations. And in our existence, we know that there are certain things that we see that have started to happen under the sun that are irreversible, and all of the evil that is happening here. But the welfare of the world is in the hands of the wise. So these are the people who will inherit the earth, the wise. But they will not only inherit the earth, they will inherit heaven and earth, because the angels from heaven are the ones who have corrupted our earth. So we are not in charge of our heavens. So now the people who will inherit the earth will inherit heaven and earth. So that would be a whole different ball game. But in all this, it also means that there has to be some sort of confrontation that will make this possible. That's why in Revelation, Jesus says like he's going to come and then he's going to wage war with the unrighteous. But what is captivating about that is that it says that Jesus will have a sword in his mouth, a flaming sword will come out of his mouth, and he's just going to be like commanding an army in the form of the archangel Michael. So through this imagery, what we actually do see or do realize is that it's all going to be like a spiritual war, whereby right now, since this is the end and there is no time, this is the revelation. So in the same way that Enoch is praying for a future time that is immediate, but that is in the future, in the sense that he's seeing the vision in the moment. He's praying about the flood that is going to happen in a few years, but he's also praying for the eternal seed on the earth. It's the same way that when we are now waging this war in the book of Revelation, when Jesus is speaking with the flaming sword, he's speaking the word. So every prayer once you have a revelation, once you have the revelation, it's only one revelation, it's only one truth, it's only one sin, it's only one God, it's only one love, it's only one you. So once you have the revelation, you are now beginning to fight, and you're going to be confronting all of those challenges. Okay. Because even before it happens, it has to happen. But even before it happens, it's already happening. Just like how we see Enoch in the ether. So even before it happens, through prayer, through your supplication, what you're doing right now, when you pray, when you're praising, you're not only doing it in the moment, but you're doing it for eternity. So don't think that like a little 3-second prayer doesn't help, because it's not about the time. Time is an illusion. This is what the book of Enoch is showing us. But what is real is the power that you have. What is real is just spirit, and God is the Father of spirit. So in that spirit of that revelation, that the war is waged with your words, this is what is happening. This is the word. This is the sword. That's why it's the same word. The S in the beginning makes a sword. In the end, it makes words. So So this is just the same thing. So when you start to use these words, what you do have to comprehend is the real power, not not like a theoretical type of sword here. This is a real sword. So this is my prayer as well, that we will also gain the power, that through everyone who hears this and is energized by this information of this book that is said will start to speak at the right time to a future generation. So when Enoch was writing this before the flood, he says, yeah, so everything, like right now in verse 7, it says the earth may not be left destitute and destruction take place forever, right? So when he's praying, right, in this book, in this moment, in this verse, in this chapter, in this instance, he is praying about the flood. But when we open the book, we heard him say that this is not a book for this moment, for this generation, or for this instant. This is a book for the future generation. All right. So this is why this is so important and powerful, that if the power is going to come to your life, the power to do anything, which is, as Jesus put it, that you'll be able to do greater things than what you have seen him do. All right. So if that power is going to come, this is necessary for you to get the foundation of what is happening in heaven as it affects us on earth. Because we've heard all of these things about the things that are happening on earth and how it's affecting our relationship to God in heaven. But here we're now hearing from the perspective of what's happening in heaven and how it's affecting us on earth. So I think it's pretty powerful already, because knowledge is power. But through this, I want everyone who hears this to be filled with like manifestation power, so that you will be able to see the things that you pray for, so that you'll be able to appraise them, so that you'll be able to see their worth in your life, not to be trapped in poverty, not to be trapped in slumps, sluggardness, or in any types of curses or hexes or spells. All right. This is my prayer through the power that is given through this exposition, that there are those who are trying to affect you, me, and everyone else in the spiritual, but through the flaming sword. Okay. This is what I'm saying, that you are free. Okay. I am free because of that flaming sword that's cutting every cord that is binding you, that is binding your finances, your economics, your travels, your mind, your imagination, your joy, your happiness, your health, your wealth, your well-being, your relationships, your family. All of those cords are severed, okay, because of the power of this word. Okay, chapter 84. After this I saw another dream, and explained it all to thee, my son. Enoch arose and said to his son Methuselah, to thee, my son, I will speak. Hear my word, and incline thine ear to the visionary dream of thy father. Before I married thy mother Edna, I saw a vision on my bed, And behold, a cow sprung from the earth, and this cow was white. Afterwards, a female heifer sprung forth, and it another heifer. One of them was black, and one was red. The black heifer struck the red one, and pursued it over the earth. From that period, I could see nothing more of the red heifer, but the black one increased in bulk, and the female heifer came with him. After this, I saw many cows proceed forth, resembling him and following after him. The first female young one also went out in the presence of the first cow and sought the red heifer, but found him not, and she lamented with a great lamentation while she was seeking him. Then I looked until the first cow came to her, from which time she became silent and ceased to lament. Afterwards, she calved another white cow, and again calved many cows and black heifers. In my sleep I also perceived a white bull, which in like manner grew and became a large white bull. After him many white cows came forth resembling him, and they began to calve many other white cows, which resembled them and followed each other. Again I looked attentively while sleeping and surveyed heaven above, and behold, a single star fell from heaven, which being raised up ate and fed among those cows. After that I perceived other large and black cows, and behold, all of them changed their stalls and pastures, while their young began to lament one with another. Again I looked in my vision and surveyed heaven, when behold, I saw many stars which descended and projected themselves from heaven to where the first star was, into the midst of those young ones, while the cows were with them, feeding in the midst of them. I looked at and observed them, when, behold, they all acted after the manner of the horses, and began to approach the young cows, all of whom became pregnant, and brought forth elephants, camels, and asses. All these cows were alarmed and terrified when they began biting with their teeth, swallowing and striking with their horns. They began also to devour the cows, and behold, all the children of the earth trembled, shook with terror at them, and suddenly fled away. Again I perceived them, when they began to strike and swallow each other, and the earth cried out. Then I raised my eyes a second time towards heaven, and saw in a vision that, behold, there came forth from heaven, as it were, the likeness of white men. One came forth from thence, 3 with him. Those 3 who came forth last seized me by my hand, and raising me up from the generations of earth, elevated me to a high station. When they showed me a lofty tower on the earth, while every hill became diminished, and they said, Remain here until thou perceives what shall come upon those elephants, camels, asses, upon the stars, and upon all the cows. Then I looked at that one of the 4 white men who came forth first. First. He seized the first star which fell from heaven. How long was the star falling? So time was not existing, because how did he catch it before it fell? And binding it hand and foot, he cast it into a valley narrow, deep, stupendous, and gloomy. Then one of them drew his sword and gave it to the elephants, camels, and asses, who began to strike each other, and the whole earth shook on account of them. And when I looked in the vision, behold, one of those 4 angels who came forth, hurled from heaven, collected together, and took all the great stars, whose form partly resembled that of horses, and binding them all hand and foot, cast them into the cavities of the earth. Then one of those 4 went to the white cows and taught them a mystery. White cows, and taught those cows a mystery, while the cow was trembling. So this cow has feelings, not only intellect, but feelings. While the cow was trembling, it was born and became a man. And the cow already represents fertility. But then the wow, come on. While the cow, this book, I've been saying this. Like this book, it just throws things like it's like unpredictable. You never know what's in the next line, and the thing is, you can easily miss what it means. All right. So yeah. So while the cow was trembling, it was born and became a man and fabricated for himself a large ship. All right. Huh. In this he dwelt, and 3 cows dwelt with him in that ship which covered them. So this is Noah's Ark, and he's the captain. Cap, C-A-P, captain. All right, I'm gonna go to my dictionary right now. Need to show you some things. Okay, so here we go, cap. Okay, so we have cap. This is a hat. Indicator rank. A crown for covering a tooth. A summit of a mountain. Okay, so a cap, something at the top. Right. So here we go, captain. Captaneous. Caput. Chief or leader. A person lawfully in command of a ship or other vessel. So the captain, the cap, the top, the highest, and yeah, they actually landed. Their ship ended up landing at a cap at the top of a mountain, Mount Ararat. All right, a person lawfully in command of a ship or other vessel, an army officer with the rank between the most senior grade of lieutenant and major, naval officer with the rank between commander and commodore. I like that word commodore. It sounds so official. Okay. Okay, great. So we have captain, right? And here we have capital. So capitalis, this is, so notice this. This is the etymology, the most important part. From Middle English capital, borrowed from Latin capitalis, in sense, head, which is the cap of cattle. And we're talking about cows. Capital. That's what we're really talking about. Capital. And he's saying, like, God, please invest in this world. This is an African book, by the way. Okay. So he's saying, like, God which country is it? Somalia, next to Ethiopia. I think, is it Somalia? Yes, it's Somalia. Somalia's main export one year was actually just cattle, because that's actual real wealth. Their main export was cattle. And like places like Botswana, one of their main exports is like diamonds, but they also export a lot of beef, cattle. It's capital. It's capital. All right. So it's talking about cows, captain, capital. All right. So it's talking about property. So cow could mean property, which is to the meek will inherit the earth or the land or the property or the wealth in the land. So, okay. So this is capital. Money, wealth, goods, services. All right. Most important city in the field specified. Capital means knowledge. Capital means awareness. capital means proficiency, and capital means head of cattle. So cattle represent that. So in a sense, this is a dream. This is a spiritual aspect. It's not a dream. Sorry, it's a vision. But in a sense, if you want to interpret dreams, if you want to have spiritual insight into dreams, this is something like if you dream of a cow, it could mean knowledge, awareness, proficiency, money, leadership, or something like that. All right. So it's a good thing. So good that people ended up worshiping cows because of the implications that it brings. Because the more that people would meditate on the power of cows, and fertility, livelihood, some people ended up worshiping. Not ended up, still do. Right now, Wall Street, the bull on Wall Street, that's the Baal, that's the money system in the world. So as long as you have a dollar bill in your pocket, that is Wall Street. That's what it is. So it is money, it's capital. So that is the capital market. So financial capital cities, all of those. So yeah. And another thing I want to show you here. So we'll start here. Start light. Okay. So light here. So light, low in fat, calories, most commonly used commercially, lightweight. So it's light speaks of weight. So it's like mass. Light speaks of mass. So informal spelling of light, lacking substance or serious, watered down, a little bit, few, a little. Okay. Now let's go to the real deal. Light. Okay. Now here we have liot, lit, light, liot, liota, liutom, liuk, light. Sounds like Luke Skywalker. Luke, Luick, 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 light. Visible electromagnetic radiation. The human eye can typically detect radiation light in the wavelength range of about 400 to 750 nanometers. Nearby shorter and longer wavelength ranges, although not visible, are commonly called ultraviolet and infrared light. Okay, so nearby, shorter and longer wavelength, although not visible, are commonly called ultraviolet, infrared. Source of illumination. Illumination. Spiritual or mental illumination, enlightenment, useful information. Facts, pieces of information, ideas, concepts. So ideas, concepts, also linked to capital. A notable person with a specific field or discipline. Picasso was one of the leading lights of the Cubist movement. Picasso. All right. The manner in which the light strikes a picture. All right. Cool. A flame or something used to create fire. All right. Cool. Let's see. Lighten. The autumn. Illuminate, give light, shine, grow light, dawn, light, kindle. All right. So here. So we have IGHT, and from here we have 8. Okay, and then 8. Remember, light, LITE, is about WEIGE, okay, which is mass. Light is not heavy. Okay, speaking of mass, which is weight, all right, which is derived from light. Now, when we have 8, 8 is the number of people who will be on the ark. Remember, the dream is about a ship and cows. But we have 8, right? But here Look, the cows are white. Okay, white.
White.
Okay, so they are white. So remember that this book we're reading was written in Africa. It was written in an African language. So this is white, okay? A living creature, especially a human being. This is archaic, okay? So this is, we're speaking in terms of ancient Shakespearean speech, a base Hungarian white. So Shakespeare, John Milton. John Milton would say, "Oh, say me true, if thou were mortal white, and why from us so quickly thou didst take thy flight." Okay. A being of one of the 9 worlds of heathen belief, especially a nature spirit, elf, or ancestor. This is in terms of paganism. Interesting. A ghost, deity, or other supernatural entity. So they saw some supernatural entities that were white, and these cows, a wraith-like creature. Wraith. And that wraith, I know it because of the Phantom, like the Rolls Royce wraith. Okay. Skilled in fighting, of age, brave, valorous, strong, stout, active. That's white, right? So now I want you to pay attention to this part. That the first definition is a living creature, especially a human being. So this creature, which was the cow, okay, the cow was born into a human being, okay, the white cow. And this is in the midst of them being white people coming from this guy. So these are white people, all right? So I hope you got that. It's very interesting. All right. So one of these 4 went to the white cows and taught them a mystery. So I just showed you another mystery because this is all the mystery. So while the cow was trembling, it was born and became a man and fabricated for himself a large ship. In this he dwelt, and 3 cows dwelt with him in that ship, which covered them. Again I lifted up my eyes towards heaven and saw a lofty roof. Above it were 7 cataracts, which poured forth on a certain village much water. Again, see, speaking in terms of villages, because this is an African book. Again I looked and beheld, there were fountains open on the earth in that large village. The water began to boil up and rose over the earth, so that the village was not seen, while its whole soil was covered with water. Much water was over it, darkness and clouds. Then I surveyed the height of this water, and it was elevated above the village. It flowed over the village and stood higher than the earth. Then all the cows which were collected there, while I looked on them, were drowned, swallowed up, and destroyed in the water. But the ship floated above it. All right, so wait, before like I just had a thought. I just need to explain something. The before, all right, 6. So I'll continue from verse 7. So white is WHITE, but then this is us deriving this from the weight or from the light, from the white. So this is to go to the weight, which is WEIGHT. Remove the W, you have 8, which is infinity, which is the number of the people who are on the ark, which is Noah and his family. And then from the weight, which is EIGHT, that's 8. All right. So when we have the LIGHT, we have the light. All right. But then when we replace the L with a W, then we have the white. And the white is a living creature. And the white is speaking of a supernatural entity. The white is a living creature, especially a human, notably a human being, but it also means certain other things like bravery, like valor, and ancestors. Okay, in terms of certain understandings, but this is a supernatural entity. All right. So I just want to clarify that. I just felt I had to reiterate. So then all the cows which were collected there, while I looked on them, were drowned, swallowed up, and destroyed in the water. So these cows are representative of people, but the ship floated above it. All the cows, the elephants, so this ship is Noah's Ark. All the cows, the elephants, the camels, the asses were drowned on the earth, and all cattle, all the money. Nor could I perceive. So this will be like a market crash as well, you know. Nor could I, but this is much worse. Nor could I perceive them. Neither were they able to get out, but perished and sunk into the deep. Again I looked in the vision until those cataracts from the lofty roof were removed, and the fountains of the earth became equalized, while other depths were opened, into which the water began to descend, until the dry ground appeared. The ship remained on the earth, the darkness receded, and it became light. Then the white cow, which became a man, went out of the ship, and the 3 cows with him. One of the 3 cows was white, resembling that cow. One of them was red as blood, and one of them was black. And the white cow left them, and began wild beasts and birds to bring forth, of all these different kinds assembled together: lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, wild boars, foxes, rabbits, and the Hanzar. I gotta know what that is. Hanzar, the sisset, the avist, kites, fonkas, and ravens. Then a white cow was born in the midst of them, and they began to bite each other when the white cow, which was born in the midst of them, brought forth a wild ass and a white cow at the same time, and after that many wild asses, while the white cow, which was born, brought forth a black wild sow and white sheep. That wild sow also brought forth many swine, and that sheep brought forth 12 sheep. And sheep is already representative of, the flock of Jesus and things like that. When those 12 sheep grew up, they delivered one of them to the asses. Again, those asses delivered that sheep to the wolves, and he grew up in the midst of them. Then the Lord brought the 11 other sheep, that they might dwell and feed with him in the midst of the wolves. They multiplied. Whoa, what does that mean? They multiplied, and there was abundance of pasture for them. But the wolves began to frighten and oppress them, while they destroyed their young ones. And they left their young in torrents of deep water. Now the sheep began to cry out on account of their young, and fled off for refuge to the Lord. So this is the flock of God, who grow up among wolves. They're terrified, but who suffers is the young generation, because the burden gets heavier and heavier for them. So they fled for refuge to their Lord. One, however, which was saved, escaped and went away to the wild asses. I beheld the sheep moaning, crying, and petitioning their Lord with all their might, until the Lord of the sheep descended at their voice from his lofty habitation, went to them, and inspected them. He called to that sheep which had secretly stolen away from the wolves, and told them to make the wolves understand that they were not to touch the sheep. Then that sheep went to the wolves with the word of the Lord. Then another met him and proceeded with him. Both of them together entered the dwelling of the wolves, and conversing with them, made them understand that from thenceforward they were not to touch the sheep. Afterwards I perceived the wolves greatly prevailing over the sheep with their whole force. The sheep cried out, and their Lord came to them. He began to strike the wolves, who commenced grievous lamentation. But the sheep were silent, nor from that time did they cry out. Then I looked at them until they departed from the wolves. The eyes of the wolves were blind, who went out and followed them with all their might. But the Lord of sheep proceeded with them and conducted them. All his sheep followed him. His countenance was terrific and splendid, glorious was his aspect. Yet the wolves began to follow the sheep until they overtook them in a certain lake of water. Then that lake became divided, the water standing up on both sides before their face. And while their Lord was conducting them, he placed himself between them and the wolves. The wolves, however, perceived not the sheep, but went into the midst of the lake, following them and running after them into the lake of water. But when they saw the Lord of the sheep, they turned to fly from before his face. Then the water of the lake returned, and that suddenly, according to its nature, it became full and was raised up until it covered the wolves. And I saw that all of them which had followed the sheep perished and were drowned. So is this escaping Egypt? Yes. So the one wolf who dwelt with the one sheep who dwelt with the wolves was Moses, and the children of Israel were oppressed. They cried out to God. Then the sheep went to speak to the wolves, not to bother them. This is like Moses negotiating with the Pharaoh. So he was predicting the Exodus here because it involved water. But the sheep passed over this water, proceeding to a wilderness. Because when they left Egypt, they did go to a wilderness, which was about both water and grass, and they began to open their eyes, all right, to see. Then I beheld the Lord of the sheep inspecting them and giving them water and grass. So, yeah, water from the rock and manna from heaven. The sheep already mentioned was proceeding with them and conducting them. So, the sheep already mentioned, Moses, was proceeding with them, Moses, and conducting them, Moses. And when he had ascended to the top of a lofty rock, the Lord of the sheep sent him to them. Afterwards, I perceived their Lord standing before them with an aspect terrific and severe. And when they all beheld him, they were frightened at his countenance. All of them were alarmed and trembled. They cried out after that sheep and to the other sheep who had been with him and who was in the midst of them, saying, we are not able to stand before our Lord or to look upon him. This is exactly what the children of Israel were saying. You know, like the way that I'm reading it, it's kind of like so surreal. It feels like this is written afterwards, but this is written before the flood, before like Noah, and then before Abraham's grandfather. It's incredible. Then the sheep who conducted them went away and ascended to the top of the rock, when the rest of the sheep began to grow blind and to wander from the path which he had shown them, but he knew it not. Their Lord, however, was moved with great indignation against them, and when that sheep had learned what had happened, he descended from the top of the rock, conducted them, went away, ascended. And when the rest of the sheep began to grow blind, to wander from the path which he had shown them, but he knew it not. So this is speaking about the time when he was up with God and they started to worship the cow. So this is linked to the vision of the cow. This is the vision of the sheep. So this is linked to the vision of the cow. And all the, wow, this is interesting. Wow. So while the rest of the sheep began to grow blind, that's when they were worshiping the cow, the bull, and to wander from the path which he had shown them, but he knew it not. Their Lord, however, was moved with great indignation against them, and when that sheep had learned what had happened, he descended from the top of the rock, coming to them, found out that there were many, which had become blind, and had wandered from the path. As soon as they beheld him, they feared and trembled at his presence, and became desirous of returning to their fold. Then that sheep, taking with him other sheep, went to those which had wandered. Afterwards began to kill them. They were terrified at his countenance. Then he caused those which had wandered to return, who went back to their fold. I likewise saw there in the vision that these sheep became a man. So the sheep always were a man. Built an house for the Lord of the sheep, all right, and made them all stand in that house. I perceived also that the sheep which proceeded to meet this sheep, their conductor, died. Moses didn't actually go to the promised land. I saw too that all the great sheep perished, while smaller ones rose up in their place, entered into a pasture, and approached a river of water. Come on. So he was really like prophesying exactly what happened to the children of Israel, which was like a plot twist that no one could have predicted. That after all that, Moses would only ascend to the top of the mountain and see the promised land, but he will not enter. Like no one knew that plot twist, but he knew it. And he also prophesied because of the water and all of that, that Moses didn't enter, no, and the people he was with didn't enter as well, because they didn't have faith in God. So their children went. That is mind blowing. Then that sheep, their conductor, who became a man, was separated from them and died. All the sheep sought after him and cried for him with bitter lamentation. I saw likewise that they ceased to cry after that sheep and passed over the river of water, and that there arose other sheep, all of whom conducted them, instead of those who were dead and who had previously conducted them. Then I saw that the sheep entered into a goodly place and a territory delectable and glorious. So now he's speaking about Joshua and all of those other people who he was leading. I saw also that they became satiated, and their house was in the midst of a delectable territory. So this is the land of milk and honey. And that sometimes their eyes were opened, and that sometimes they were blind, until another sheep arose. And sheep sounds like sleep. And then like you count sheep to go to sleep, right? So this is speaking to people. Until another sheep arose and conducted them. He brought them all back, and their eyes were opened. The dogs, foxes, wild boars began to devour them, until again another sheep arose, the master of the flock, one of themselves, a ram, to conduct them. This ram began to butt on every side these dogs, foxes, wild boars, until they all perished. But the former sheep opened his eyes and saw the ram in the midst of them, who had laid aside his glory. Listen to this. But the former sheep opened his eyes and saw the ram in the midst of them, who had laid aside his glory. And he began to strike the sheep, treading upon them, behaving himself without dignity. Then their Lord sent the former sheep again to a still different sheep, and raised them up to be a ram, to conduct them instead of that sheep who had laid aside his glory. Going therefore to him, and conversing with him alone, he raised up that ram, made him prince and leader of the flock, all the time that the dogs troubled the sheep. The first ram paid respect to this latter ram, and the latter ram arose and fled away from before his face. And I saw that those dogs caused the first ram to fall, but the latter ram arose and conducted the smaller sheep. That ram likewise begat many sheep and died. Then there was another sheep, a ram, instead of him, which became a prince and leader, conducting the flock. And the sheep increased in size and multiplied, and all the dogs, foxes, boars feared and fled away from him. So what is this now about? The kings of Judah? That ram also struck and killed all the wild beasts, so that they could not again prevail in the midst of the sheep, nor at any time ever snatch them away. And that house was made large and wide, a lofty tower being built upon it by the sheep for the Lord of the sheep. The house was low, but the tower was elevated and very high. Then the Lord of sheep stood upon that tower, and caused a full table to approach before him. Again I saw that those sheep wandered and went various ways, forsaking that their house, and that their Lord called to some among them, who he sent to them. But these the sheep began to kill. And when one of them was saved from slaughter, he leaped and cried out against those who were desirous to kill him. But the Lord of the sheep delivered him from their hands and made them ascend to him and remain with him. So this is now Jesus? Come on. The Lord of the sheep stood upon that tower and caused a full table to approach before him. But these sheep began to kill, and then one of them was saved from slaughter. He leaped, cried out against those who were desirous to kill him. But the Lord of the sheep delivered him from their hands, made him ascend to him, and remain with him. He sent also many others to them to testify, and with lamentations to exclaim against him. Again I saw when some of them forsook the house of their Lord and his tower, wandering on all sides and growing blind. So he's speaking about blindness a lot. I saw that the Lord of the sheep made a great slaughter among them in their pasture until they cried out to him in consequence of that slaughter, that he departed from the place of his habitation and left them in the power of lions, tigers, wolves, the zebra, and the power of foxes, and of every beast. And the wild beasts began to tear them. I saw too that he forsook the house of their fathers and their tower, giving them all into the power of lions to tear and devour them, until into the power of every beast. Then I began to cry out with all my might, imploring the Lord of the sheep, and showing him how the sheep were devoured by all the beasts of prey. So these are the people of God, devoured by all the beasts of prey. But he looked on in silence, rejoicing that they were devoured, swallowed up, and carried off, and leaving them in the power of every beast for food. He called also 70 shepherds, and resigned to them the care of the sheep, that they might overlook them, saying to them and to their associates, Every one of you thenceforward overlook the sheep, and whatsoever I command you do, I will deliver them to you numbered. I will tell you which of them shall be slain, these destroy. And he delivered the sheep to them. Then he called to another and said, Understand, understand, understand. Oh, what a commandment. Understand. Like, hey, you there, come here, understand. Yeah, understanding. Hey, understand. All right. Understand and watch everything which the shepherds shall do to these sheep, for many more of them shall perish than I have commanded. Of every excess and slaughter which the shepherds shall commit, there shall be an account, as how many may have perished on my command, and how many they may have destroyed of their own heads. Of all the destruction brought about by each of these shepherds, there shall be an account to the number I will cause a recital to be made before me. How many they have destroyed of their own heads, and how many they have delivered up to destruction, that I may have this testimony against them, that I may know all their proceedings, and that delivering the sheep to them, I may see that they will do, whether they will act as I have commanded them or not. So this is speaking of those people who are in charge of other people, that they're supposed to act in command of, they're supposed to act according to God's commandment in terms of the sheep that they have, because it's really up to them what happens to the people in their care, which is a big deal. Of this, however, they shall be ignorant. Really. Neither shall they make any explanation to them, neither shall thou reprove them, but they shall be an account of all the destruction done by them in their respective seasons. Then they begin to kill and destroy more than it was commanded them. And they left a weight. So these people are supposed to destroy certain things, to kill certain things according to their commandment. And they left the sheep in the power of the lions, so that very many of them were devoured and swallowed up by lions and tigers, and wild boars preyed upon them. That tower they burnt, and overthrew that house. Then I grieved extremely on account of the tower, and because the house of the sheep was overthrown. Neither was. So is this the story of the big bad wolf and the three little pigs? But then what I'm getting here is that, all right, is that like this is like a destruction on a massive scale? Is this also like the flood or the end times? What is this? Neither was I afterwards able to perceive whether they again entered that house. The shepherds likewise and their associates delivered them to all the wild beasts, that they might devour them. Each of them in a season, according to his number, was delivered up, each of them. One with another was described in a book. How many of them? One with another were destroyed in a book. So they were described in a book. How many of them, one with another, were destroyed in a book? More, however, than was ordered, every shepherd killed and destroyed. Then I began to weep and was greatly indignant on account of the sheep. So why are the shepherds killing and destroying? Upon commandment. Why are they being ordered to do this? In like manner also I saw in the vision him who wrote, how he wrote down one destroyed by the by the shepherds every day. He ascended, remained, and exhibited each of his books to the Lord of the sheep, containing all which they had done, and all which each of them had made away with, and all which they had delivered up to destruction. He took the book up in his hands, read it, sealed it, and deposited it. After this I saw shepherds overlooking for 12 hours, and behold, 3 of the sheep departed, arrived, went in, and began building all which was fallen down of that house. But the wild boars hindered them, although they prevailed not. Again they began to build as before, and raised up that tower, which was called a lofty tower. And again they began to place before the tower a table, with every impure and unclean kind of bread upon it. Moreover also all the sheep were blind, and could not see, as were the shepherds likewise. Thus were they blind leading the blind. Thus were they delivered up to the shepherds for a great destruction. Oh, okay, so remember, like I commented that this is speaking about blindness. So these shepherds are blind shepherds, they don't see. Thus they were delivered up to the shepherds for a that's why. That's why they were given unto. Also, this is the prophecy. Like in the end days, people will go to people's ears would be itchy for certain. You know that verse that says like, yeah, in the end times, people's ears will desire to hear certain messages, so the blind will be led by the blind, and those people would actually be ordered to do what they're doing at that time for a period. Yet thus they were delivered up to the shepherds for a great destruction, who trod them underfoot and devoured them. Yet was their Lord silent until all the sheep in the field were destroyed. The shepherds and the sheep were all mixed together, but they did not save them from the power of the beasts. Then he who wrote the book ascended, exhibited it, and read it at the residence of the Lord of the sheep. He petitioned him for them and prayed, pointing out every act of the shepherds, and testifying before him against them all. And taking the book, he deposited it with him and departed. All right. I'm gonna stop now. Okay. So we'll pick it up from here next time. But yeah, let me go. Yeah, 89. Great. So yeah, thanks a lot. And as always, I appreciate your time and you hanging out with me here. See you soon.